Good afternoon, everyone, if it is afternoon when I upload this, and welcome to another episode. Today is going to be a lore blog, and in fact the last lore blog that we've done them all of them, pretty much. This is the very last one. Last we were looking at, before this we were doing Asura week, and this is really the very last one for me to read out. The latest one really would be the one on the Jotun, but I've already read that, and yeah, we're just left with the Grawl, a blog post by Jeff Grubb called Planet of the Grawl. And here we will learn about one of the other minor races. So we've had a few blog posts like this before. For example, one looking at the polar bear people called the Kodan. There was one looking at the Quaggan called the Mostly Harmless Quaggan. We've looked at all of them, so that will all be there in the playlist if you want to learn about some of the other minor races. And in fact, as I said, I'm toying with the idea of going into like spotlights on Guild Wars 2 daily as we go forward. But in any case, this is going to be our in-depth look at the Grawl. Before we go into the blog post itself, I would point out that the Grawl were quite a big race in Guild Wars 1 in some ways, and quite a small race in other ways. They were one of the first races we ever met, one of the first enemies we ever fought. It was funny, at the start of Guild Wars 1, really, some of the first enemies you fought were just generic bandits that you didn't really learn much about or understand much about. But one of the other ones were the Grawl, and these are a very ape-like, very primitive race that really hasn't advanced very much in the 250 years leading up to Guild Wars 2, unlike some other races. But they do have some interesting little quirks about them. In Guild Wars 1, for example, we learned they were in kind of a very weird treaty-ish position with the Char, where they would both just kind of fight the humans and not necessarily fight one another. And there were some funny quests to do with that, and some interesting little anecdotes about the Grawl that we learnt. They're not exactly the most widespread of races around Tyria. You will only find them in certain locations, but they are certainly still about in Guild Wars 2. They've not fallen, and they've not really grown in some ways. In a lot of ways, they are very much the same as we knew them in Guild Wars 1, except that now we just get a little bit more information about specifically what the hell is going on with them. So yeah, The Planet of the Grawl by Jeff Grubb. This was released on October 14th, 2011. That's getting on quite a long time away. I can't wait for more lore blog posts to come out. Just to clarify, if they ever do release another one, I will be reading those out as well for you. But yeah, here's the last one. There will be bits of concept art going up on the screen as we go forward, and also the footage in the background will either be from me, in which case it would be some of the crappy footage where I'm running around dying all the time, or it will be from someone who's offered their footage for Guild Wars 2 Daily, in which case you'll find a link down in the description below. I'm sorry I haven't decided that just yet. But anyway, enough preamble, let's actually do it. Yeah, The Planet of the Grawl. Of all the races on Tyria, the ape-like Grawl are the most underappreciated and underestimated. A race of furry simian bipeds, the Grawl can speak and use tools and weapons. So they're not so stupid they can't speak, it's just that when they do speak, you probably won't make much sense out of what they're saying. They even have a fair approximation of clothing, but they lack most of the trappings of advanced society. They make their homes in caves on the edge of civilization, and are considered a lesser race of raiders and bandits by the more developed cultures around them. While many Grawl do resort to banditry, just as many seek nothing more than to be left alone. I think that's important. Do remember that, because the Grawl we can't consider, at least when I look at them, I can't consider them as an evil race. They're not like the Crate that you just out and out hate and there's very little redeeming about them. The truth is that with MMOs, if you tend to find an enemy faction or an enemy race like this, usually you're just going to be fighting them, and that can give people the impression that, oh, these guys are all bad and we should be fighting all of them. Truth is that in lore, there are a lot that you don't meet out on the battlefield and just want to be left alone, which is perfectly fair. And we have seen, not so much in the beta, I'm not sure I remember much coming from the beta, but certainly the demos that showed some of the higher level Char stuff at the, like for instance, Gamescom, we did have a couple of situations where we could interact with Grawl on a level that wasn't simply fighting them, which is quite cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the game with that. So let's learn a little bit about their biology and their society. We get a quote here that's described as a traditional Grawl saying, and it goes, "We are the meek, we are the humble. We watch and we wait for others to stumble." Okay, so Grawl are humanoid ape-like creatures. They're slightly larger than the typical human and are covered with long fur of various shades of grey. Because their faces and postures are definitely simian, Char scholars have theorised that the Grawl are a debased form of human, or that the humans are a type of Grawl uplifted by their gods. Very interesting idea. It goes into what the Kodan think about the Norn, I suppose, how they're looking at how certain races could be related or fallen or greater versions of one another. Very cool idea. I mean, we know that the humans are aliens to Tyria. We don't know whether necessarily as the gods brought humanity to Tyria, whether that's talking about a literal move from one world to another, or maybe something more metaphorical in that the gods came to Tyria, saw the Grawl perhaps, and thought, let's transform these guys, let's make them more intelligent, let's transform them in body and mind, and in that way they have brought a new race to Tyria, the humans, and in that situation the humans wouldn't necessarily be aliens to Tyria. One thing to consider, however, upon that theory, is that the only Grawl we've ever seen are in the more northern areas of the total mapped out world that we've seen of Tyria so far, and it does go in the lore that the humans came from very far south after they were brought to the world by the gods. There's all the chance in the world that there could be, you see what I did there? There's a very high chance that the Grawl could exist south of Cantha too, and this could still fit, but we've never heard of that. I mean, Grawl in Cantha is quite a bizarre concept, really, when you get used to the idea of the world and what races exist in different areas. The idea that Canthans would even know about the Grawl is quite a funny proposition, but hey, I like the idea. That's certainly quite a cool direction that maybe things could have gone in. And it's what the Char believe as well. Maybe they just believe that because they like to put the humans down. Who knows? Human researchers, on the other hand, point out the heavy haunch shoulders of the Grawl and the fact that they walk on their toes, both features of the Char, and posit a close kinship between the Char and the primitive Grawl. Unlike the Char, however, the Grawl run with a bounding, skipping gait that gives them sufficient altitude to see their targets at a distance, and they move with a sure-footed grace that gives them an advantage in their rocky territory. So, yeah, then you can see the humans are doing the same thing. I do think it is just really these two races that have never got along, spitting at one another and trying to liken that race to the other. Really, I think the humans have got more of a ground to stand on here because it was the Char that had their alliances, really, with the Grawl and interacted with the Grawl more than we ever saw humans doing. So, yeah, I've got to say I agree with them a little bit more. This idea about their gait, by the way, they move, the way they, like, skip about and stuff, wasn't something you saw so much in Guild Wars 1, or it might have been there on some level, but it wasn't ever something that really had a lot of focus to. But when you see a Grawl in Guild Wars 2 moving around, you really can see they've got a very distinctive way of moving around, and that's actually something I really like that Guild Wars 2's doing, in that they really have put a lot of thought into the animations of the different races, even if they're not playable. I mean, it's all well and good to go into a lot of detail and thought about how the Asura should be moving because they're a small race and they need to look like what they're doing is realistic on some level, and, you know, adding that bit of comedy there, and they did a lot of thought there. And it's all well and good thinking about the Char and how maybe the Char should run on all fours after they've been moving after a certain period of time, which is something else they did and something else that was very cool. It's all well and good putting all of that in, but it's something more to also put that same kind of analysis and thought into the lesser races, the ones that we're not even going to be playing, and they've certainly done that, and the Grawl are a great example of that. The Centaurs are another one for me. The way that the Centaurs move and run around really does look very, very realistic, and it's really quite cool. And yeah, the Grawl, you'll see them, they're hopping around in a very funny, kind of cool way, but also I can imagine being pretty intimidated by that as well, especially if I know I'm slightly out of my depth. The Grawl live in small tribes consisting of several families, usually under the command of one or more shamans. Shamans we saw a lot of in Guild Wars 1. It was back then really very simple though. The enemy factions would use the same skills as the skills that were available to players in the actual game. That was just kind of how it worked, and for the most part a lot of the enemies you would fight also had professions similar to humans. So there'd be like monk Grawls, and really this is gameplay we're talking about here, but those Grawl that were monks could typically just be called shamans, and Ulodaites was another one. So that was how we were familiar with that in Guild Wars 1. Obviously monks don't exist in Guild Wars 2, but shamans do actually exist within the lore structure of things. When you kind of get rid of all that profession stuff and stop bogging down mechanics with the lore, you will see that shamans are there, and really this blog post is the first time we understand what the shaman purpose is in a lore perspective, outside of just, oh, these guys are monks and they'll be healing the other enemies, so you should probably target them first, which is quite cool. So just to reiterate, Grawl live in small tribes consisting of several families per tribe, and these are all under control, usually, or under the command of one or more shamans. These shamans are responsible for the spiritual and daily life of their family unit. They wield magical powers that help protect their flock and enforce the will of their gods, okay? Magic is such a broad topic with Guild Wars, and it's really kind of hard to explain or theorize about where it all comes from. But this is something to consider, that a primitive race like the Grawl typically aren't associated as having a very good grasp of magic or able to use magic very well. It's definitely a theme in the Guild Wars universe that the higher a race becomes, their grasp of magic and their ability to make new magic and put magic to good use expands with it. So when you look at some of the really ancient races like the Massart, for example, they have a really in-depth ability to manipulate magic, and you look at the Jotun as well, who at one point were a very high race, and they also had a real ability with magic. But then you've got these lesser races like the Grawl here, who really the majority of them don't know what they're doing with magic. That's the general idea that comes across, except a couple of them, and those would be the shamans, who are trying to enforce the will of their gods. Grawl tend to subsist as hunter-gatherers, though they often rely on scavengers. So this is the kind of society we're looking at here. They're hunter-gatherers. They do not plant fields, and although they herd animals, they do not otherwise domesticate them. They have no architecture, using only natural caverns as their homes. These subterranean dwellings are decorated with cave paintings, netted frames of wood, and strings of stolen glass balls and other scavenged baubles. Something to consider here is they sound fairly like the script there with scavenging things like this. In the beta, if you came across the Grawl, it was quite likely that you had the opportunity during some of the renowned hearts to wipe stuff off of their walls and get rid of all their cave paintings and stuff, which I actually felt a little bit bad about, because that's one of the few signs the Grawl have got that show they have any kind of culture, their paintings, and then we're just getting rid of them. But that was one of the things you could do in the beta if that was your cup of tea, which at the end of the day I think it was most people's, because they just wanted to finish the renowned quest. But moving on, clothing and equipment of the Grawl. Grawl have some level of proficiency in leatherworking and are able to fashion primitive metal weapons and tools, so they do have a means to equip themselves. While they are comfortable in little more than a loincloth, Grawl warriors conduct raids bedecked in heavy leather armours with protective hoods. As symbols of their office, Grawl shamans wear colourful headdresses and necklaces made with the feathers of rare birds or bones harvested from their enemies. When it says rare birds, all I can think of are moas, because moas come in so many different flavours in Guild Wars 2, and like some of them could be quite rare. That's all I can imagine. Grawl weapons are usually poorly crafted imitations of the weapons used by Norn, human, and Char. They use scythe-like axes made of dark metal forged in campfires and craft bows to bring down prey at long range. Grawl are not discriminating. They will often use weapons and equipment stolen from other races and repurposed to their own needs. I love how specific they are here, that they're just trying to imitate weapons used by the Norn, the humans, and the Char. The idea presumably being that the Asuran stuff is way too complicated and high-tech for them to even begin to try and imitate. And maybe the Sylvari stuff, the Sylvari have got all these ideas about how they grow a lot of their own equipment and stuff, and maybe that's what's coming in there, that even if the Grawl wanted to imitate that, they couldn't. They couldn't just pick up a leaf and try and turn that into some form of a blade, like a Sylvari might grow a leaf blade, for example. So I really like that. It's just the Norn, the humans, and the Char that the Grawl can really imitate. But I also like the idea that a Grawl finds like an Asuran phaser or something and picks it up and starts trying to use it. That would just be fantastic. We get a little bit of concept art here, which has probably been on the screen for a while, showing off some of the different ways that they deck themselves out, and you can even see kind of a naked Grawl there, which is pretty cool. The next section is called History, and we get a quote from someone called Crippus, who is a Grawl raider. And Crippus says, "Fire warms, but fire also burns. The gods keep us safe, but sometimes they destroy. We kill, or we are killed. This ends the lesson." So that's like a Grawl lesson. As you can see, the way they speak, their language really isn't fully developed right now. Keep going back to their gods, though. Don't worry, the blog post will go into that in just a moment. The Grawl are native to Tyria, and Ascalon in particular. So this is where they come from, Ascalon. So that's something interesting as well, that the Char were living in Ascalon. I still like to think of, I've come back to this all the time, but who named Ascalon Ascalon? Was it the humans when they got there, or was it the Char when they were there originally, or was it one of the other native races? Was it the Grawl, perhaps? I mean, that could be interesting. If maybe before the Char were there, the Grawl were there, and that's where the name came from. I think that would be fantastic. But this is where they're native to, Ascalon, presumably because they were only living in caves and they're just hunter-gatherers. There was some means of them existing there with the Char without some massive war, as if you could ever really have a war war with the Grawl, but the earliest mention of them is found in early Char military tributes that predate the arrival of humans in the area, so they're definitely there before humans were. In these annals, the Char are always portrayed as victors, with the defeated Grawl pulling the Char commanders in great chariots. So I take it back, actually, it looks like the Char just conquered them and let them stay there, but only as their slaves. Brilliant. The Char dominated the Grawl, forcing them into the Shiver Peak and Blaze Ridge Mountains and beyond, where they lived at a subsistent level. So it's interesting they say that, because as we knew Ascalon in Guild Wars 1, when the humans had now taken the land from the Char, they were letting the Grawl essentially run rampant. The Grawl were all over Ascalon, even in human territory, so the Char were a lot more careful and cunning about keeping the Grawl out, which is cool. Also, I love this mention that not only were they pushed into the Shiver Peaks to the west, but they also pushed into the Blaze Ridge Mountains to the east. It's not often we get lore about that mountain range. Slowly, it's been ramping up, and particularly with the revelation that a lot of Char are living over that mountain range. It's actually the home of one of the legions over there. We're getting more lore as time goes along, but it's very exciting when we see stuff about the Blaze Ridge Mountains, because we've always known that they're there, and we've had the name for a while, but we haven't known exactly what kind of activities were going on until now. Now we know that at least one thing, the Grawl were forced there, not just to the Shiver Peaks, but also to the Blaze Ridge Mountains that run on the other side of Ascalon, if you're not aware. That's the border of the map, essentially. We haven't seen past those. Dispersed and powerless, the Grawl survived as raiders in the human kingdom of Ascalon and elsewhere. When the Char returned under the Flame Legion, so this is in Guild Wars 1's time, they successfully enlisted and in many cases enslaved many of the local Grawl as militia. The Grawl proved to be unmanageable beyond a squad level, however, and were used primarily as scouts, and this is what we saw in Guild Wars 1. This is the kind of mutual thing that we saw, where Grawl would fight us, Char would fight us, but they wouldn't fight one another. And I suppose that wasn't the Grawl's own decision there, but the Char managed to essentially use them as their minions. And when we got to Eye of the North, there was some particularly cool stuff about the Char trying to use the Grawl in a really effective way, but the Grawl were just too difficult to work with because they weren't intelligent enough. Since the conquest of Ascalon, the Grawl have returned to their meagre existence at the edges of civilization. Few races have the need or interest to interact with the Grawl, whose lack of respect for personal property and untrustworthy behaviour makes any dealings difficult. A number of individuals of many races have looked upon the Grawl as potential allies, cheap labour or easy marks. All have been disappointed in the results. Literally just completely unworkable and useless nuisances. That's what the Grawl are, essentially. The Grawl today exist much as they did hundreds of years ago. Superstitious cave dwellers whose only interest in the outside world consists of slaying those who wander into their territories or pose an affront to their gods. Once again, back to the gods. So, let's learn about matters of faith. Another quote here, this time from a shaman. As I said earlier, the shamans, they supposedly out of all the Grawl are more in tune with the gods. This person is called Thokakalok, who says, "I am one of the faithful. You are mistaken in your beliefs. They are all godless heretics." Wow, brilliant. Okay, so Grawl are bound together by faith, but they're separated by it as well. They are deeply, deeply religious, shamanistic people, but their particular brand of animism creates numerous localized factions that are mutually intolerant of each other. This may be why the race never rose to any kind of prominence. In a nutshell, the Grawl believe that particularly important places, individuals, and items are imbued with great spiritual force. Kind of similar to the Norn. I can't help but compare their belief system to other races' belief systems every time this comes up. But they believe each of these things have got some kind of spiritual force. If you think about the Kodan, they believe everything, no matter what it is, however it's manifested in the physical world, has a spirit, some kind of spirit to do with it, which is interestingly similar to the Grawl. I think it's all to do with how these different races and cultures within Tyria are somehow impacted by the fact we know there is this real tangible thing known as the mists that somehow parallels and corresponds to the real physical world everything's living on. So a lot of the belief systems that therefore are developed within Tyria and this universe of Guild Wars, they all have these kind of similarities, and I think it probably all branches from that one truth. Everyone kind of, even if they don't understand it completely, and in the Grawl's case I suppose they don't understand anything about the mist at all, it would have somehow had an influence indirectly on their culture and the way they've developed and how their belief systems really come about. That's the kind of way I look at it anyway. That's why I feel that, particularly when you look at the Kodan, these guys, the Norn, the Crate to an extent, they all have quite similar veins running through what they believe. This differs from the animistic beliefs of the Norn, the blog post clarifies, who hold that the spirits of the wild are imbued in all of its children, i.e. bear is present in all bears. The Grawl version of animism professes that all physical things contain spirits, and that particularly powerful or unusual beings and items hold spirits capable of granting miracles, and are therefore worthy of veneration. For example, they think that particular bear is powerful, so we should worship it. By enhancing the power of a given item, location, or being, Grawl hope to curry its favour and protection. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. There is a distinction there. The blog post doesn't even mention the Kodan, which is kind of complicates things, I suppose. As a result, Grawl tend to worship a wide variety of items, ranging from natural features to unusual phenomena to powerful creatures. One tribe of Grawl may bring offerings to a rock feature that looks like a Grawl's face, like the one on the right, the blog post says, so I'll throw out that concept art there. While another may revere a great swamp beast and sacrifice travellers to it in order to save themselves. The depth and sincerity of their worship tends to pit rival Grawl tribes against each other, as each believes they have the true religion, and that all others are led by false gods. Something I think we're all probably familiar with, something that appears in a lot of games that's happened in real life, let's face it, and that's kind of what's going on with the Grawl. On occasion, great religious movements form among the Grawl, encompassing multiple tribes throughout an entire region. During these transient periods of religious fervour, Grawl will abandon their traditional beliefs for the trending new faith. At times like this, the Grawl are at their most dangerous, for the religious friction between the new faith and the old can erupt into a bloody holy war, one in which all non-Grawl are potential converts, hostages, or enemies. So they really strike me as they're either not really doing very much and they're just existing in their own little tribes, or there's kind of an explosion of activity with the Grawl. Because don't forget, in this period before they start to fall out and this supposed holy war occurs, there's going to be a lot more cooperation between the tribes and possibly progress among the Grawl as a race, and that just for that reason alone they'd be more threatening. I like the idea though that they could have these periods where they all believe like one certain thing and start to cooperate and maybe make some progress, maybe invent something that's useful. I like the idea that they get like slowly higher up the ladder, but then this holy war happens and any progress they made is just completely removed because anybody who understood it is now killed, the inventions are destroyed, and they're just back to square one. I love the idea that that just keeps continually happening. That would just be fantastic. The superstitious Grawl are belittled by other more advanced races for their xenophobia and the seemingly ridiculous nature of the things they worship. Humans and Asura tend to be the most dismissive of Grawl beliefs, while the Norn are more sympathetic. I love the way we're actually banded in there with the humans. I just like the idea that at some point you could like have a human and Asura in a bar, and the only thing that they really connect with is both of them belittling the idea of the Grawl, because the humans spend so long at the underside of Asura who believe that they're so much better than them that it would be nice for them to just have some common ground and bitch about something else together. I just love that idea. Humans and Asura tend to be the most dismissive of Grawl beliefs, while the Norn are more sympathetic, feeling the Grawl have simply missed the large point of the spirits of the wild, which makes sense. I mean, that's more similar. The Char, who historically have oppressed the Grawl, are the most emphatic in trying to cure them of their belief system, as their superstitions make the Grawl easy prey for manipulative agencies such as the Flame Legion. However, many Char draw a parallel between Grawl animism and human religion, to the irritation of both Grawl and humans. Just more petty squabbling, I suppose. It's fantastic. That's really the main lore stuff for the blog post. Haven't done this for a little while, but ArenaNet do on most of their lore blog posts, not really in the actual race weeks, but on most of them, especially on the lesser races, they give us a section on behind the scenes. It's been a fair few months since I've got to read one of these out, but this will be the developers actually talking to us about what they were thinking when they created this race, and there's a fantastic bit of concept art there of like this really cool looking Grawl. So yeah, behind the scenes, this comes from Jeff Grubb. He says, when the Grawl first appeared in an alpha test version of Guild Wars Prophecies, they were called Trogs. This old nomenclature survived deep in the heart of wikis devoted to the subject, and in Guild Wars 2 names, like Grawl Udalite, a name which makes more sense when you consider it was originally Trog Udalite, or Trogdalite. A Trogdalite is traditionally a cave dweller, and though Dungeons & Dragons transformed them into stinky lizard guys in the mind of role-playing gamers, the traditional image and odour of the primitive Neanderthal hang heavily over the Grawl. The Grawl in the original Guild Wars were primarily spawned as a general-purpose bad guys, and they are absent from most of the major quests. They were overshadowed by the Char and undervalued by all. Of all races interior, the Grawl are the most left behind in Guild Wars 2, still firmly ensconced advanced in their past. Not all species got a chance to advance technologically in the 250 years between our games, and the dispersed, primitive Grawl were good candidates to remain the same as they were in Prophecies, for better and for worse. And that's all they've really got to say on the Grawl. There'll be some guys we'll be meeting. I can't wait to start interacting with them in a way that's more than just fighting them. They're a cool lesser race, really. I think just owing to the fact there wasn't much going on with them in Guild Wars 1, they were just kind of there. I mean, Jeff Grubb says it himself, that they were just spawned as general purpose bad guys, right, in Guild Wars 1. There wasn't that much going on with them. We did get lore as time went along, but they never really were a standout lesser race to me, and especially considering that come Guild Wars 2, they haven't developed that much either, which is something I like. I like that they made the decision to keep one of the races the way they were. I mean, so many advances have happened across so many of the different races. I mean, you look at the Hecate and the Hylic and how they are now, and just everything and all the new races. I like and I commend that they kept the Grawl the same, but for that very same reason, they're not really up there on my list as favourite minor races. I mean, they might be yours. You'd certainly be quite unique if you really were a massive Grawl fan. But yeah, they're quite cool. They're not one that I think ArenaNet would very quickly make a playable race. But hey, in like 10 years or something, if Guild Wars 2 servers are still live and we still have expansions going on, there's no telling what they could do with the race. There really isn't. But that's the Grawl. Very cool. I hope you guys enjoyed this blog post. Like I say, until ArenaNet release some more lore for us on their blog, this is the last one, and that's kind of me done with this series. As I said, it will all be in a playlist with the other ones. The start of this series was me in Guild Wars 1 doing dungeon stuff, and there is some commentary to do with those dungeons. If you just stick it out, you will find that I've done extensive looks at all the other blog posts. I've had people asking me to go through and do like just these alone in a video. I'm really not prepared to do that. I've read it all and I've given my impressions on all of it. It's just packaged slightly different, but it's in the exact same playlist. If you go back, you can see it all there. But yeah, there you go, guys. That's what I got for today. I'm looking at doing my beta impressions in just a minute, though that will probably upload later in the week. And yeah, I suppose that's about it. Thanks very much, guys, and I'll see you next time.